We got some Ian Jackson updates. He is visiting St. John's this weekend. John Rothstein reported that he will be at St. John's on Sunday and Monday. NC State and Arkansas are also still involved. I believe that was per On Three's reporting that those two are still sort of looming or lurking in this recruitment. But by all accounts, St. John's out in front with a chance to close on the talented North Carolina five-star scorer. And I'm excited to see what you think of this. Ralph, what do you make of this? Is St. John's going to close the deal?
It would surprise me if they don't. It would surprise me if they don't. Let's put it that way. I think they're in clear pole position. He's a kid who's from the Bronx. He's a kid who had been committed to UNC for a while in high school, but when St. John's first hired Rick Pitino, they put a full court press on flipping him, and he almost did, and ended up sticking with his commitment to North Carolina. And I think it's worth remembering at that time, I don't think people thought RJ Davis would be back, and North Carolina was coming off of a very successful season and having a very successful season, one that got Hubert Davis an extension, let alone what happened this year. Now I think he's made some comments about how he wants to play for a better coach. UNC is, I think I don't know if he regrets the decision, but I do think St. John's being so quickly at the top of the list would indicate that he has had some remorse that he maybe did not flip to St. John's in the first place, and they need some help on the wing. Makes a lot of sense, and he's one of St. John's very top priorities. Seems like there's a willingness and eagerness from both sides here.
Do you think if this is the pair that is imminent, we'll have a breakdown when he commits if it happens. But are Rick Pitino and Ian Jackson a good fit? Because on paper, I know there's history here. Based on what I saw at North Carolina, I don't feel like it's the greatest player coach fit ever. Not in terms of scheme or anything like that. Just how Rick Pitino is wired and how Ian Jackson is wired. Is that going to work?
I think it will work as long as Ian Jackson tries harder defensively. That's gonna what it boils down to. He's going to be able to play free offensively, and I think Rick Pitino is okay living with some of the stuff that Ian Jackson does because of how talented he is. And we also just saw St. John's have a need for more like that, given how poorly they shot last year and how their inability to shoot and have just bucket getters cause them to lose in the second round. Rick Pitino doesn't want to do that again. Rick Pitino does not live for Big East championships. He does, but Final Four bursts on top of that is what really gets Rick Pitino going. And the way you can do that is you have a bucket getter. You have enough defensive pieces around there to where he doesn't have to be your best defender or defensive minded guy. But if he tries hard and gets you buckets on the other end, that's where I think this could really work.
Is this an overcorrection then? Like in some sense, just basically like our offense was flat out bad, wasn't good enough. Just give me a bucket getter and I'll figure it out.
They got to replace RJ Lewis's 17, 18 points a game, and
Yeah.
Kadari in there as well. So
How good
need
is Ian
points.
Jackson? Like, do you, if that is the what he's being brought in for, like, not exactly the same player, but RJ Lewis replacement, first option, come score for us. How good is Ian Jackson? How good is St. John's if this is the pair?
Top 10 team.
You think he's good enough to carry that?
I think Ian Jackson is more like the guy who had the stretch where he was scoring 20 plus a game for North Carolina than the guy who was seeing 10 minutes a game down the stretch of the season. I
Okay.
think that was entirely, I think the fit at UNC was bad, just with everybody in that backcourt. I think that was bad for everybody. And I don't think Hubert gave him the leash or the respect he probably earned.
Okay. I can see that. I am intrigued by all the North Carolina departees. Like
Yeah.
obviously one of them's my point guard, so I have to be. But like the mix of RJ Davis, Seth Trimble, Elliot Cadeau, Ian Jackson, whatever Drake Powell's going to do, who knows? Like those five together trying to play really into like 3 to 4 spots
Yeah.
and only having one ball to go around is something I think we're going to see the better version of all five of these guys somewhere else, or at minimum, the better version of everyone that's not Cadeau. There is a world you tell me Cadeau is just the same guy. It doesn't matter who he's with. But everybody else, like, in a more traditional roster build, I think could work.
Yeah.
Um, but I guess just looking at what St. John's has, I'm a little skeptical of it. Especially like I really like Jason Sanoan, but those two together, are they like 1A, 1B offensive guys here?
That fit would be anti this past year's St. John's team, right? But, Kadari coming into last year, we thought Kadari and who Lewis turned out to be would clash a little bit because they are some repetitive skill sets. Both needed the ball in their hands. And Pitino made that work with Davon Smith in there as well. I would trust Pitino more than just about anybody else in the country to just work with talent however you get it and find a way to win.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's totally fair. He's earned that through decades of success. So I'm fine with that. If St. John's doesn't have a commitment from me and Jackson by Monday, by Tuesday, either one, does that mean something went wrong? And what could go wrong here, Ralph?
What could go wrong is the money does not line up, I would assume, or the fit is just deemed to be too questionable that he wants to see what else is out there. But I don't think either side is under an impression that is uh, would suddenly change over the weekend. We'll see, but there's a chance that he's going there, thinking that he's going to be the guy on the perimeter, and Patino pitches him on, maybe being 1B to Sozan and seeing, how that goes, or viewing him, demanding more defensively or somehow, and Jackson doesn't necessarily like that. Wants to see what else is out there. There are always things that can go wrong, but it would be a turn, I think, at this point.
Are Will Wade and John Calipari the two that you want to see lurking when it's closing time?
Yeah.
You're not worried about Will Wade or John
I
Calipari,
mean, sitting in this position, I think it would be a lot of fun. If I'm Rick Pitino, they're not who I want to see. Who I want to see
right?
sitting and lurking because NC State, both of them can offer a significant role. NC State in particular, and Arkansas just come play for John Calipari, be my next guard that goes to the NBA in the second round after we thought they were first round picks
Yeah. Goes to the Sweet 16 first, and then goes to a couple other places. Something St. John's didn't do, by the way.
because they lost to Arkansas. Yeah.
Well, I'm just saying. What's by the way, I truly don't know. I feel like there's not many programs in the country as good as St. John's that I'm less plugged into than St. John's. Although shout out to the Vice documentary that
That
did
was
feature
awesome.
our transfer portal coverage. That was awesome. Uh, what's their financial situation here? Are they spending as much as John Calipari, Tyson Chicken are?
No, no, but I've looked at them as a team that if they need it, can find a way to get it.
Okay.
Or Patino can find a way to get it. I don't know if this would be the case with anybody at St. John's, but Patino would find a way to get it.
Can we play fake Monopoly dealer for a second?
Sure.
I'm going to throw completely fake numbers. Sometimes I come out and say allegedly, and it's like real numbers that I'm allegedly saying. I have no real anything on numbers for Ian Jackson. Gonna just throw some stuff out there. Arkansas says they'll give him $2.5 million. If St. John's has the means to match, should they match that?
I would.
Do you think they will?
I think that would be the ceiling of
Okay.
where they would go. That's where a ceiling of where I would go. I'm not paying Ian Jackson three, given some of the other guys that were available for three. But 2.5, I could talk myself into if it meant I got him and you weren't leaving my campus.
Do you think there's a world where one of the other two schools exceeds that?
I think there's a world Arkansas does,
Yeah.
um, somewhat based out of need. I don't think NC State has the means to go that high and spend the way they want to spend on the rest of the roster.
Yeah. Okay. Feels like if it's in the same ballpark, it's just St. John's. But I kind of wonder, like, is there a world where whatever the paperwork is that's given to him on this visit is just not exactly the number that is expected? And then there's a phone call to Cal on like, what can you do here? Or
Yeah,
what would you do here?
there's a chance Patino and St. John's try to play a hometown discount.
Yeah.
That may backfire.
Big fan of Rick Pitino and John Calipari going head to head for things, though.
Just need Will Wade to come up with another strong ass offer and see what
It'd be kind
happens.
of fun too. Ralph, I'm going to ask you a question I asked you multiple times on Friday night at the Final Four. Uh, what's your fear level right now? I'm assuming you're pulling for St. John's to close the book here and not John Calipari to swoop in. What's your fear level of that happening?
I have no rooting interest,
Oh, pish
unlike Friday
posh.
night.
You liar.
Have no rooting interest in this. Um, the way I would phrase it, it would very much surprise me if he left St. John's without committing.
All right, you heard it here first. We will have more coverage of Ian Jackson's commitment once it happens, if it happens this weekend or whenever it happens. If you want more portal coverage, subscribe to Sleepers Media so you can see it all.